projects call is open at the moment. You might not be aware of that, but it is the cooperation projects for 2023, and with the deadline on the 23rd of February 2023. So this morning we're just going to give you an overview of information around the call, and we'll come to the questions, as I said, at the end. Delighted to welcome this morning the Open House Dublin manager, Karen Lee Walpole, who's from the Irish Architecture Foundation, and she'll go through their project as part of Open House Europe, and how the project is structured and the application process. So we'll be really excited to hear what she has to say and kind of fill us in with how they approached it. So we'll get going. If we can move on to the next slide. So just a little bit about us, the work of the desk. You may be aware of this already, but the Culture Office is part of the Creative Europe Desk Ireland. There are 3 offices: the Media Office in Dublin, the Media Office in Galway, and then us, the Culture Office here. We're based in the Arts Council in Dublin as our national host. So we all work together on different events, and what we provide as an office is around information, advice, and assistance to you, potential applicants, to the Creative Europe programme. We promote the programme at local, regional and national level. So we have an ongoing programme of events, which we kind of try to incorporate all the calls that come up throughout the year, and then obviously give other networking and assisting with partner searches and all those other kind of assistance we can help with potential applicants. Then we have developed a cross-sectoral partnerships with other stakeholders, and we work closely with the media programme on joint Creative Europe events. The next slide, thanks, Katie. So why the European Union funds culture? This is really interesting in terms of how you might think about why you're applying to the Creative Europe programme or why you're applying to European Union funds. You don't necessarily have to read a lot of documentation on policy documents, but it is really helpful to be aware of what is the backbone, the policy backbone, and the broader context of the funding programme itself. So what feeds into the priorities and the programme are documents such as the EU Agenda for Culture, the new work plan for Culture 2019 to 2022, and I know there's a new updated work plan which will start in 2023, and we'll kind of give you details on that as it comes to us. Gender Equality Strategy 2020 to 2025, the European Green Deal, and the European Framework for Action on Cultural Heritage. And all these documents feed into the programme, and they are updated as they go in each kind of funding year. And as you can see later on in the priorities that we'll go through, those documents are really obviously kind of framed in the priorities as really important areas to consider when you're applying to European Union. The next, thank you, Katie. So how the European Union funds culture? So it funds through direct funding actions, European Capital of Culture. We know that Ireland has been successful in various applications to European Capital of Culture. Prizes, there are popular music prizes, the Contemporary Architecture Prize, the Mies van der Rohe. We know that we were also successful recently under this award. The Contemporary Literature, European Prize for Literature, and the Cultural Heritage Europa Nostra. And then there are centrally administered funding programme, and that is the Creative Europe programme, and we're kind of in the middle of it now, 2020 to 2027. So for this new programme, there has been 2.44 billion allocated across the whole programme. That includes the media sub-programme, the culture sub-programme, and the cross-sectoral strand. And that was a major increase on the previous programme, and that was due to really coming out of COVID and providing recovery and resilience money for the sectors that were really obviously very damaged throughout COVID. So we're still in this, and what we see is, we'll show you later, that there is increased funding again for the cooperations project, as they're really highly applied for, and obviously organizations really need this funding for their work. We'll go on to the next one. So the budget, as I said, there's a total budget now of 60 million euro, which was a huge increase. It was 33 million in the last call, so this is basically a 50% increase. So what we see is that there's 21 million for category 1 in the small category, 21 for the category 2, and 18 million for category 3, the large. And 20% of this budget is allocated to sector-specific priorities, and we'll see what these sector-specific priorities are now in a moment. The next slide there, I think I'll be handing over to Katie, potentially.
Yeah, thanks, Aoife. So this is, hi everyone, thanks so much for coming. This is really kind of, again, back to when Aoife had the slide around why the EU funds culture. So it's really important, like this is the framework for all of your applications under the Creative Europe Culture Programme. So all of European funding, it's not developed in a vacuum. It's developed within a kind of broader global context that we're all operating under. And the first one you see here is resilience and recovery. And this is the legacy of the COVID-19 crisis. You know, wanting to kind of recognizing how vulnerable the cultural and creative sectors were, and wanting to kind of build resilience and sustainability within those sectors. Innovation and joint creation, you'll see this really strongly within cooperation projects, cooperation and the exchange of practices. So again, this is really just about kind of collaborative partnership projects. Capacity building of artists, this is something really important to remember, that while the funding we're talking about today isn't open to individual artists, they are the beneficiary of a lot of this funding, and these projects can act as little mini, you know, funding hubs themselves, and again, key players and multipliers. So the language is often not great in some ways, but really what they're saying is these projects will reach out and benefit artists and audiences and people beyond the direct participants in the funding. So the other thing, and this is a really useful slide to bookmark, because here we're going to talk about cross-cutting priorities. So this is really across every single European fund. So whether you're applying to Creative Europe, if you're applying to Horizon Europe, if you're applying to Erasmus+, these priorities will be across all of those programs. And really what we're talking about here that need to be addressed in some way by all projects are inclusion, diversity, and gender, and the environment, and the fight against climate change. So while your project, that might not be essentially the ideological center of your artistic activities, if that's the word, you're going to have to show how your project in its design and its implementation, in its project management, will contribute or address these issues. So Aoife and I, we receive a grant from the European Commission to run the Creative Europe desk. And for instance, climate sustainability crosses everything we do. We have that discussion, you know, every time we're planning an activity. Certainly diversity, inclusion, and equality. Again, everything we're planning or doing, we're putting through those lenses. So let's just look here at Creative Europe 2023. So again, while the program is set for 7 years, you will see kind of incremental changes or different focuses on year in, year out, depending on, again, what's going on in a global context. So here, you'll see, obviously, the war in Ukraine is still informing a lot of the European Commission's funding. COVID recovery continues to be one, and then obviously the energy crisis and climate change. So in order to address such overarching or large, I guess, problems, there is a large budget increase proposed for this year. So this is really, really good news. And I know there's some people on this call, you know, that came very, very close, say last year, to getting funding. But actually the budget just wasn't there, and they want to address that this year because it's not sustainable for them to have, you know, very high quality projects not getting funded. So again, as I said, there will be a continued direct response to COVID. So I think the legacy there, I think we're all dealing with. So these projects in turn will be dealing with that. There's a continued sectoral approach. So understanding that different cultural sectors have different needs, different challenges and different strengths. Again, this is, you know, this is an amazing, and it's a good tool when you're kind of developing partnerships or projects. Would be the Culture Moves Europe Artist Mobility Strand, has 21 million over the coming years. So that's a really exciting development. And again, that this year is the European Year of Youth. So if your project engages or works with children and young people, it's definitely something to highlight in your application this year. So I can't remember, this is probably still me, is it Aoife? So there's a number of funding strands within the Creative Europe program. The one that we're talking about today is obviously European cooperation projects, and it's the bedrock of their funding. So year on, year out, this would be the majority of the funding available for culture under Creative Europe goes through European cooperation projects, but there's a number of other ones. So there's the European networks of cultural and creative organizations. So again, there's not many. I think we definitely have a leader this year within the craft and design sector, but the profile here would be a lot of Irish organizations and artists are members of Creative Europe supported networks. There's also European platforms for the promotion of emerging artists, circulation of European literary works, formerly called the Literary Translation Strand. And again, that just hasn't been updated, but the Culture Moves Europe Mobility Call and Music Moves Europe. There's also a really interesting one to watch out for. I think they've just probably come close to selecting the organization to deliver the funding, but it's called Perform Europe, Perform EU. So I think Leona might be able to share the link there in the chat, but that's a really interesting one that Irish organizations have used to kind of test new models of touring and performance across Europe. So let's briefly go into what is a cooperation project. So a cooperation project is it's a partnership project. It involves partnerships between organizations in different countries. And we'll go into how it is structured, but it's in general terms, a minimum of 3, between 3 and 10 is usually the minimum. It's a multi-annual cultural and artistic project. It needs to demonstrate that it achieves common objectives across borders. This is not meant to replace national funding in any way, shape, or form. It will require, if not match, co-funding. Individuals aren't, as I was saying, eligible to apply, but artists do participate in these projects via open calls, commissions, residencies. So what do you need to kind of show with a cooperation project to be funded? So for a really strong cooperation project, you'll need to demonstrate that you're attempting to address a systemic problem or obstacle that is negatively affecting your sector across Europe. You should be collaborating with communities and audiences in a broad range of contexts. Again, this is terrible language, but basically they're asking you to show that you're fostering the exchange of skills and competencies amongst partners. So what this means is, you know, you do say that these are artistic projects, but they're very broad. So never forget yourself as a cultural producer, as an organization within this, and looking at the ways in which the partners, you know, in the project can learn from each other and share. And crucially, this is really about increasing European exposure and consumption of non-national European works, because certainly across Europe, probably less so, I guess, in an English-speaking country, but across Europe, there's a lot of countries, and really, they really just kind of look at national works. And so this is about kind of broadening that out. So here I get to stop talking and ask, I'll stop sharing and I'll ask Karen Lee Walpole, as Aoife was saying, she's Open House Dublin manager. And we're really excited to have her here because really we can blather on for hours. But these are the people that you really want to hear from. So thanks, Karen. I'm going to stop sharing now.
That's no problem. Thanks, Katie. I am just going to attempt to do the same, share my screen, and hopefully it'll all work out. There we go. Is that okay? Great. So as Katie said, my name is Karen. I curate and manage Open House Dublin with the Irish Architecture Foundation. I hope some of you are familiar with the festival. It happens every October across Dublin City and County. Sorry, one second. Earlier this year, along with 10 other European cities who also host an open house event, we applied for the large-scale cooperation project. Happy to say we are now at the grant acceptance stage and have been provisionally approved for our project, Open House Europe. I'm going to run through a few slides for you just to tell you a bit about the project and our process, and hopefully it might be helpful. So some background, and also you're free to share these slides at the end as well. Open House, for those of you who don't know, the concept came about in London in 1992 as a way to foster a better understanding of architecture for the general public. At the heart of this is learning through the direct experience of architecture and buildings and interactions between professionals, architects, and citizens. And since then, we now have more than 50 cities around the world with an open house festival each year. And our own festival, Open House Dublin, actually has been going since 2005. The growth of these cities taking this on has led to the emergence of a network, Open House Worldwide, which was formed in 2010 as an umbrella organisation to offer advice and structure to any city wanting to adopt the concept, and also to control access to who actually takes part and make sure we all adhere to the same values and principles. Collectively, open house events across the globe reach over 1 million people. So during open house weekends, what happens is generally that buildings in the city open their doors for guided tours. These tours are always given by people with architectural knowledge or architects themselves. And open house festivals offer diverse and different experiences, all free of charge to the public. As well as those tours, we will have lectures, debates, talks, performances, and all sorts of other activities. Indeed, during the pandemic, many of us had films, we made films, and we did a lot of digital content as well. So open house fundamentally is about democratizing the city and the place that you live in, engaging people and empowering them to call for a well-designed built environment and to advocate for community engagement as well. Open House Europe is a cooperation project between, as I said, 11 European cultural organisations. We all organise annual open house events. In total, actually, there's 12 open house events within the 11, because in Greece, as you'll see from the list, the same organisation organises two. Cooperation emerged with an aim to embrace a more inclusive debate about architecture as a shared European identity, and to strengthen the role of architecture as a change maker, which is something that was important to all of us individually. So it was an easy place to start from. Open House Europe is based on the values of openness, collaboration, reliability, accessibility, among others, and active citizenship and experience of architecture directly. And those are the other cities that we will be collaborating with. So this is a little bit heavy, but as is the application process, a lot of work, as you know, goes into the application process, and the difficulties of trying to do that with other countries when obviously you're not in the same place at the same time. So in January this year, which is when we started to apply, our lead partner Vilnius put out a call to seek partners to collaborate on an Open House Europe project. And we responded to that call, and we began with two key priorities. The co-financing of our existing open house events and activities, with local events, our own festivals, responding to an international dimension, and to create new opportunities for international collaboration and shared learning and experiences. We had a background in doing this anyway through Open House Worldwide, but this would be a European focus. From there, we held an initial full-day workshop where we shared and discussed all of our aspirations, our existing ideas, initiatives from all our local events, and discussed possible themes that could be reflected in our local programs that would be more relevant in an international context. So from February to March, we met weekly to develop our very detailed work plan and work packages. And we divided up, from a practical perspective in doing this, we divided up into working groups. We had governance and management, communications, dissemination, program content, and thematic coordination, and internationalization. So this enabled us all to get as much done as possible within that time period. Each work package then, as you probably know, has to have objectives, activities, milestones, deliverables, and it's all very, very detailed. So for each work package that you put together, there's a lot of work goes into it. From March to April, we refined the work packages down and obviously our budgets. We met about 4 times during that period, and there would have been maybe half-day sessions, just to give you an idea of the amount of time kind of that goes into it. So our work packages, we had 7 in total: project management, coordination, collaboration and knowledge exchange, networking and development, digitization and engagement, communication and dissemination, branding strategy, and then the integration and implementation of our actual open house events. And it sounds like a lot as I'm reading it now. The project fundamentally is centered around 9 core objectives that are all relevant to the scope of the call, and those are divided within 3 categories. So the first is innovation and collaboration. Within that, we sought to create and foster robust cooperation of architecture culture organizations, strengthen the organization's position and impact in the sector, which is important for us as well, enable collective learning, to develop and innovate through knowledge sharing and mobility, develop and nurture the organizational capacity of each partner. This is particularly interesting because whereas I have an organization behind me, the Irish Architecture Foundation, which is very well established, some of our consortium partners would be a much smaller setup. A lot of them would rely heavily on volunteers. They wouldn't necessarily have a full-time staff. So we can offer expertise and assistance to them throughout the process as well, and contribute to the development of principles of high quality architecture and the built environment. And then we have dissemination and education. So within that, to coordinate and communicate a common Open House Europe agenda to promote high quality architecture and urban environment. So to work together to develop an agenda and a manifesto for all other cities that are taking part in Open House across Europe. Educate audiences about the urban environment and architecture and respond to contemporary challenges, and follow the new European Bauhaus values to raise awareness about heritage, the future of architecture in our cities, and socially responsible, inclusive and sustainable architecture fundamentally. And finally, accessibility and engagement. Many of us have started the process of attempting to improve the accessibility of our local events and to engage with audiences at this point, but it's a process that we think we can all help each other with significantly, to engage and mobilize audiences to experience architecture as a shared European identity, and to provide accessible and inclusive content, ensure that digital and physical engagements are there for different audiences, and to develop an international dimension and ensure accessibility on various scales across our festivals. And then further breakdown for each objective. We needed to provide a detailed needs analysis, and that involves a lot of measurements, defining your indicators and making sure that you can illustrate how you're going to measure achievement, to demonstrate how the project will tackle environmental challenges and ensure gender balance, inclusion, diversity and representation. Easier for us perhaps than some other art forms, I think, in considering it's directly related to the built environment in many ways. to detail how we'll work together, which is very important as a consortium, and how we would define our target groups and our shared audiences, and to illustrate the concept and the methodology behind each of our objectives. So sure, just a little bit of work there to do. So happy to say that we did get to a point where we got all of that done, and we were able to secure the details of our programme from 2023 to 2025. So each year we're going to host an annual summit in a different city each year. It'll be in Dublin in 2024. And that summit will bring together architects, people who work on open house festivals, volunteers, and relevant people from each city to talk about a particular theme, and also to have a session on how open houses run, and have a shared knowledge session there every year as well. The volunteer exchange programme is something that's very important to all of us. For Open House Dublin, we have approximately 250 volunteers a year, and that's reflected across European cities in terms of open house. It's a huge opportunity for volunteers, and what we wanted to do was give volunteers the opportunity to bring their skills and experiences to other open house cities. So within this fund, we will be sending volunteers across Europe to take part and to work with other open house cities. The creation of a shared digital platform and an atlas, that's in its early stages, but the idea that we will have a shared space where all of the cities can build content and collaborate, and that the atlas will act as a physical online manifestation of everything that's happening, not just in open house cities, but any architectural initiatives happening all over those countries. Open calls each year for visual stories that will be part of a yearly exhibition, and then open calls for guest cities and new partner organisations as we go. Within that, then there's also the support of 25,000 per year for each of our local open house festivals, and the open house festival theme will tie in with the shared European theme each year. So that's actually me. But I am available for any questions. As I say, it is quite, I'll stop sharing there for a sec. It is quite a detailed process. We put a lot of work in from January to get to here, and we're only kind of, it takes the year for us effectively. But, and as I was going through our application forms, pulling out some details for you today, it kind of hit me how much detail actually has to be worked on. And I would say that the biggest piece of advice I'd give is to give yourself enough time, and to schedule enough time to actually work with your partners if you are going to submit an application. And that's me, Katie.
Thanks a million. Let me just share again. Karen, that was so good. And I think you're so generous in sharing the presentation after, because I know there's a number of slides there. You've just laid it out so clearly how to kind of, I guess, get the structure on it and get it organized. So thanks so much. I'm going to share ours again. And Karen was saying she's happy to kind of stay on until the end. So please ask her questions, because she can give you a really honest answer, which some ways we can't all the time. So let me see. I'm going to share again. I can't remember, Aoife, is this me or you or?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Oh yeah.
Thanks. So just, to go into what the cooperation strands are in more detail. So there are 3 strands for the project. So the small, I should start small, medium, large. And as we learned from the new budget, there's 21 million for both the category 1 and category 2, and then category 3 large has 18 million allocated. So for the small, it's a minimum of 3 partners from 3 countries, and the budget is 200,000. So the 80% of the total budget, these are the new kind of levels of co-funding from the agency. So this has moved up to 80% of total budget, which is great. Again, with the medium size category 2, it's 70% of the total budget that the agency will co-fund. And that's a minimum of 5 partners from 5 countries with a budget of 1 million per project. And then category 3, a much larger project, Strand, with minimum of 10 partners from 10 countries and a budget of 2 million. And that's co-funding of 60% from the agency. We did hear that this year, so as we were saying, there's a massive increase on the budget for the overall cooperation project call, and that is because of so many applications in the last call. And some advice around that is that if you're a first-time applicant and even a second-time returning applicant, the advice would be to go for the small category 1, because category 2 with the medium is very, very popular and it is more competitive. And so that's just a kind of insider's bit of advice, because you just will have more of a chance with category 1 if you apply there. And also they're talking about just developing your capacity as a partnership going forward, so that your next time, if you come back, you could go for medium, or equally you could go up to the large, because you will have that experience on your side. Anyway, next slide, Katie, thanks. So who can apply? So organizations with a legal entity, NGOs, cultural institutions, museums, arts and cultural organizations, and you can be partnering or have associate partners with other organizations like Third Level, and so we see that a lot in partnerships in Ireland. So, but the organization itself will have to be a legal entity in Ireland. You must be operating in one of the participating program countries, and you must have sufficient financial and operational capacity. Next slide, please. Thanks, Katie. And the objectives. So the objectives for this call, you must select one of the following, and they are creation or innovation. So creation to strengthen this transnational creation and circulation of European works and artists, and innovation to enhance the capacity of European cultural and creative sectors to nurture talents, to innovate, to prosper and generate jobs and growth. So you must select one of those and kind of build your application around either creation or innovation. And the next slide. So cooperation project priorities, as we said, coming out of the kind of broader policy framework, these are the priorities for the cooperation projects. So audience, increase cultural access to a broader audience. Audience is kind of one that was in the program previously as well, but then on top of that, there are more additional priorities, and they are social inclusion, projects for or of marginalized groups and intercultural dialogue, sustainability, contribute to the European Green Deal and New European Bauhaus, new technology, how the culture and creative sectors can increase competitiveness, and international dimension, build capacity to be active at an international level. And then, as we said, 20% of the budget is for sector-specific priorities, and they are literature, music, architecture, cultural heritage, and new additional ones of fashion, design, and sustainable cultural tourism. So what is advised is that within your application, you focus on 2 of these priorities in detail, and so that you're not spreading your project kind of thinly across the whole, all 6 of them, because that's kind of impossible. And again, what we said at the beginning is that all projects have to address in some way how you're kind of you're structuring your implementation and your project management around the areas of inclusion, diversity, and the Green Deal or climate action. And the next slide. So I thought this might be useful because, as Karen said, when you kind of look at the application process, you might have a slight aversion because it is so complicated, and there are talk about different roles and who's who, and sometimes it can be quite confusing. So to break it down, the applicants are the beneficiaries, so they're the coordinator and the partners and affiliated entities. Affiliated entities are entities linked to a beneficiary with similar rights and obligations as the beneficiaries, but they do not sign the grant and therefore they do not become beneficiaries themselves. Associated partners, they're organizations which participate in the action but without the right to get a grant money, so they bear their own costs. These can be non-eligible country organizations, so that's useful to know if you're working with an organization, let's say from the UK, they're not eligible to apply, but they can be associated partners. Again, with subcontractors, they can be a non-eligible country organization. So subcontractors are third parties, and they're implementing specific tasks that the beneficiaries cannot implement themselves, and they're getting paid for it. Third parties are giving in-kind contributions. They bear their own costs, and they will not become formal recipients of EU funding. So they can also be non-eligible country organizations. And the next slide. So work packages, as Karen said, and she had on her list 7 separate work packages. So that's a very comprehensive and detailed kind of setup of work packages. You don't have to do 7. You can do, there are 3 that you are kind of, you need to cover, but then you can have additional ones. But what they do say is kind of keep it to a minimum, because this will help with budgeting and reporting and keep it a little bit simpler. So eligible costs and activities, group these under your defined work packages, and we'll show you what the work packages are now in a second. The overall application and the overall project will be paid on a lump sum on your deliverables and will not be receipted. So that's a new kind of novelty of this application process. And what we have there is a link that was only really recently, like in the last week, shared by the agency and it's really useful, a PDF around how to manage your lump sum grants. So definitely have a look at that. It kind of explains what a lump sum and how it works and how to manage it. So it'll be useful. Allowing yourself a greater emphasis on defined deliverables, outcomes and results will allow for a simpler process of reporting and managing the whole thing overall. Lump sums are calculated per work packages, and they're paid only when the work package is completed. So that means you will get your 80% of your lump sum at the beginning of your gap when you sign up to your program and begin the program, but the final 20% will be paid when the work package is completed at the end of the program or the project. You need to be clearly identify whether your action is completed, and that is around your reporting and how you prove that you have completed the work packages and completed the activities. We'll also show you that in 2 minutes. And then just, which is really important to remember, and us as an office, we kind of find this hard to remember sometimes, but we need to, as a recipient of EU funding under the program, you need to continuous monitoring and documentation and evaluation of your project, which is really key if you start that from the beginning, because it just allows less crazy work to build up at the end. We're having actual real life experience of this. So where to begin? So define your work packages, group the activities and costs together, as we said. An example of your work packages. So management, administration and coordination, implementation and communication and dissemination are key, integral to each project. So you need to have these work packages in place. The implementation looks at artistic and creative expression, capacity building, network and knowledge sharing. So they are your activities, and whatever way you're going to deliver those kind of areas of work in your activities. So let's look at eligible activities. This is really nicely written here. We're going to start to look at your work packages. So management, administration and coordination. what are the activities? They can be planning and preparation, meetings, evaluation, quality control, coordination activities, etc. The deliverables, so you'll have to outline these in your application, that you will deliver an agenda or meetings, minutes of meetings, evaluation reports, conception planning reports. So they will be how you will deliver on that particular work package to prove that you've done it. And the next slide, Katie, thanks. So communication and dissemination, again, this is another integral work package. And Leona is the woman in our project who delivers on this. We all do, but she manages this, the communication and dissemination. So the activities in that work package could be communication, dissemination campaigns, promotional events, communication material, etc. And your deliverables would be a communication plan, strategy, website, newsletters. I mean, there's a lot of work within this because you're doing this ongoing over all of your activities, social media posts, banners, website, etc. So artistic activities, so these are in your implementation work package, and they could be rehearsals, festivals, performance, literary translation, circulation of works, digitization of cultural heritage material, etc. And your deliverables can be schedule, planning of rehearsals, prototypes, original creative works, songs, artworks, concerts, publications as books, apps, if it's a technological piece of a product. So they can be the proof of the deliverable, how you proved that the activity took place. And the next slide, please. And then capacity building. So these could be artistic residencies, mentoring programs, training courses, and your deliverables would be the schedule of mentoring programs, the mentoring course program, the travel documents, and who is present, attendee lists, etc. So the next slide, and then you're not networking and knowledge sharing. So this would be another work package, and examples of activities could be conferences, workshops, research studies, market access activities. And your deliverables, how you prove it, would be a program agenda of the conference, attendee list of a workshop, a conference conclusion, a report around that, or policy papers, etc. And the next, so looking at eligible costs then for the budget. So there are direct staff costs, as we mentioned, subcontracting costs, so subcontracting out activities, using a budget for that, purchasing costs. Then under that is travel, accommodation and subsistence, equipment, and other goods, works and services. There's then financial support to third parties, and there are 7% indirect costs. So they're rent, etc., that costs that are not directly related to implementation of the activities. So just to say, when we will do our workshop, our application workshop in January, we'll go into that budget more specifically in detail, and we'll physically look at it and how you break it down into each kind of area of those subcontracting, etc. So it'll be a little bit more easy to understand, but anyway, this is the breakdown of it kind of on paper. And assessment. So overall, the maximum points is 100, and the threshold for funding is set at a minimum of 70 out of 100. More than 50% of the maximum score under each category must be reached. And they are broken down into relevance, quality of content and activities, project management and dissemination. And we're hoping that because of the extra, as Katie mentioned earlier on, that really high level quality applications were not successful in this round or this call. So we're hoping with the additional funding now that more applications will be funded, and although those thresholds won't be brought down, it'll just be easier when it's spread across the 3 strands with the additional funding. And the next, so just to look at a kind of updated version of how Ireland participates in Creative Europe. 72 Irish organisations were involved in Creative Europe funded projects to date. That's a total project grant of 45 million and a direct aid grant to Ireland of over 6 million. Ireland represents more now, this needs to be updated, than 2.26, so maybe it's coming up to 3% of overall funding. Ireland's success rate averages around 36.6% with an overall success rate of an average of 23%. And we've partnered in the past with 34 countries out of a possible 41 in the programme. So I might throw you over virtually to Katie.
Oh, thanks, Aoife. Sorry, Aoife's really taken pity on me because my voice is a bit gone, but I'll try to get us through the last bit. So I think, you could see from Karen's presentation, this isn't something you kind of decide a month before the deadline. There's a lot of groundwork and thinking that needs to take place. So really one of the things that we always say is, the steps you need to do if you're, beginning this journey. The first thing is obviously to look at the capacity of your organization to take this on. One of the ways in which it can work quite well, we used to say there's an easy way and a hard way. The easy way is if this is aligning with what you want to do, your kind of longer term plans, if it's kind of aligning with Creative Europe priorities, or if you're kind of already wanting to collaborate internationally or across Europe, this can work really well. Where it becomes difficult, certainly in terms of capacity, is where you have a really full kind of national program of activities and events, and you're adding this on. That can really increase the workload. One of the things that can kind of help with your capacity is looking, identifying partners nationally that could actually help you put in a Creative Europe application. We have a number of projects over the years that have more than one Irish partner delivering some of these activities, and that can work really well if you're a small organization. So looking at, even some non-arts organizations, looking at local authorities, looking at universities, and again, just kind of looking at ideas and seeing how they align. The thing, and I think there's probably jumping ahead, but it's important to remember that the Arts Council now has an international policy. We have a head of international, and international activities are funded through other national funding programs. So it's really important to start talking to your national, your kind of regular ongoing national or local funders, and seeing the ways in which those kind of development activities and, maybe initial international exchange could happen through national funding. The other thing, Aoife mentioned it, is we do facilitate partner searches. So if you do we're part of a network of 40 Creative Europe desks all across Europe. So if you are looking for a partner, if you had like a specific kind of country or region in mind, we can help with that. And then again, keep in touch with us. The life cycle, I guess, we have is we kind of work with people on an ongoing basis. It can usually be between 6 months and a year of getting an application in. So just to keep in touch. The other thing, which is kind of amazing, and it's been going since 2016, is the Arts Council has a dedicated Creative Europe co-funding award. The deadline for 2022 applications is actually today. So this is open to Irish arts organizations successful under cooperation projects. So unfortunately, it's not open to universities or those type of institutions. However, within a project like that, if an Irish arts organization is delivering activities, they could apply. So you can apply for Irish artistic costs directly related to the implementation of the project. And this goes a long way to kind of looking at that co-funding that you have to raise. So we kind of believe that in the context of the European Commission raising the amount that they'll actually, or the proportion of the budget that they'll actually fund, in a smaller case, you just have to raise 20% of your budget. If you take that, also with the idea that you have a co-fund here in Ireland, I think it's a very kind of attractive proposition. I think this always sounds like a weird dating analogy, but it does make, I think, Irish organizations attractive as partners, you know, within a European project, because we do have that avenue to source co-funding. So I think only about 40% of the countries taking part in the program have that. So we are in a good position. This is here just to remind you, again, as I said, international activities are supported under all of the Arts Council's funding programs, Agility Bursary Project, Arts Grant Funding, Strategic Funding. So it is good to start to kind of talk to your head of team or your contact there about your longer term European or international plans. The Arts Council also has an international residency that can be a good way to test a kind of bilateral relationship that you might have. So keep an eye out for that. That will be in the spring. I think the deadline's in April. The Arts Council just published its funding schedule, so you could check there. The other thing is we kind of run events kind of throughout the year. Our next one, and it'll be fantastic if people could come along to that. We're actually launching our latest case study publication on the 15th of December in the Goethe Institute at 10 a.m. So I think Leon is sharing that link. We're also hosting, if you are interested and you're a glutton for punishment, we are going to go through the application process in detail on the 12th of January. So do come along to that. And then we have a number of events planned in the first quarter next year. So just, if you haven't already, sign up to our newsletter and follow us on social media. So I think that's us.